Support comes from the Arizona Inn, a four-diamond, family-owned historic resort hotel and restaurant on Elm Street near the U of A. Information is at arizonainn.com.
Hello everyone, I'm Jim Nintzel, the executive editor of Tucson Weekly and Tucson Local Media, and we're here to talk Zona politics. Joining me today is Brian Smith, the Tucson Salvage columnist at the Tucson Weekly. Brian has been a rock and roll star, an alt-weekly editor, and the author of a book of short stories, Spent Saints. He's now got a collection of his Tucson Salvage columns coming out in book form later this month. Brian, welcome back to Zona Politics.
Hello, Jim.
Congratulations. Congratulations on the book. I love your column, of course. But for those who have missed out on reading them, what is Tucson Salvage all about?
The book?
The columns, the book. What is this thing? This Tucson Salvage thing?
They're stories about people that I meet in Tucson, basically, and they're stories of often folks who've overcome incredible odds to survive, or they're just struggling to survive, working class folks. I mean, they're stories of people that I think should be told, and I think they're important in that sense, that the story should be told.
What drew you into the whole idea of the Tucson Salvage column?
Well, years ago I did a similar column at Phoenix New Times, and later I was working in Detroit and wound up without a job, and I came back to Tucson, and I'm like, I'm not going to write about things that other people write about. I don't want to write about celebrities. I don't want to write about people making movies. I wanted to write about people who are, the people doing the mundane things in our lives are the ones who fascinate me the most. And those are the sorts of people I always wanted to document as a writer. I mean, I came up wanting to be a writer since I was a little kid. And all my favorite authors did the same sort of thing. And in my fiction writing and this nonfiction writing, I try to write about people that nobody else cares about, or maybe that's not the right word, people that others overlook.
Yeah, you grew up in Tucson, but you decided to get out when you were young, like Bruce Springsteen advises. You swore you'd never come back here.
Right.
Here you are back here again. But what was it that made you think, I got to get out of this place?
A lot of it was this frustration of thinking that there was nothing going on in Tucson, and there kind of wasn't. I mean, 18 years old, I was the lead singer of a punk rock band, and 20 years old, and we got the hell out of here because there was nothing in Tucson. And we got sick of getting picked on at Circle K's because of the way we looked, right?
Right.
But when I came back, I realized, without slipping into the trope of the returning home trope, I realized a lot of things about Tucson that I had taken for granted. And I don't know if that's years of being on the planet or becoming sober or what, but there's a certain power here that I don't find anywhere else.
And we are glad you came back, because we love the column, but we also love you. And you've talked a lot with the run-up of this book with your battles with depression, alcohol, drugs.
Right.
You've kicked your bad habits, but
yeah.
You still wrestle with depression.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
It doesn't go away.
I think that a lot of people do, and it doesn't make me any more special than anyone else, but I do from personal point of view. Yes, I oftentimes think of suicide, and not that I'd ever do it, but I mean, it creeps in, you know. But now I have a 5-year-old, and there's a lot more to live for in those terms, so I couldn't really do it if I had with a 5-year-old.
Thank goodness. Yeah, well, they depend on us, right?
I mean, I'm just stating the obvious. But
right. How do you go about finding the people that you're writing about?
Well, I was just thinking about this on the way over here. I like how when I was writing fiction, and when I do write fiction, and when I'm writing nonfiction, I find nonfiction to be a lot harder to write because I have to overcome a certain amount of insecurities to go out and meet people. I mean, I have to become somebody else. Then I have to earn their trust to tell me their story. And those are two really difficult things for me to do anyway. And to do it for a story is a whole nother ball game. And then I find stories sometimes just driving around Tucson. Sometimes just, like I wrote about this guy who's a graffiti artist, and he has no legs, and I saw him get off a bus carrying a piece of art, and the art was beautiful, and I chased him. Well, he has no legs, so I didn't really have to chase him, but I followed him into a center for blood work and begged him to tell me his story, and he did after a while, after I earned his trust, and it wasn't easy for me.
And he's one of the characters. You've got a movie.
There's a movie based on
documentary that goes along with this.
Yeah, we got funding. The publisher in the UK was believed in the stories enough because they consider it to be a book of stories of America, not just a regional. And I was really grateful for that because that's what I was hoping. Though when I started doing the column for Tucson Weekly, I didn't have a book in mind at all. I mean, I was just looking for something to write. And this whole thing has been pretty miraculous the way it's unfolded. But my wife happens to be turns out she's a really gifted filmmaker, I will say. And we got funding after the book. We got galleys for the book and forwarded them around, and we got some funding to do this documentary, and somehow I talked my wife into directing it, or I don't know how it happened, but we got this funding. We have a producer, and he came out to Tucson. We had hired a cinematographer. We went out and we tracked down 5 of the stories, 5 of the people I wrote about, or 6 actually, and shot them, and they told their stories again on camera, and it's beautiful. Actually, it's screening in LA for a week in January, the doc, and we're screening in New York, and it's kind of taking off in an unforeseen sort of way. And the thing about these little documentaries is it really extends the life of the book too, and I'm absolutely stunned by these things that are happening all of a sudden.
And you, if folks in Tucson want to see the film, you're also going to be showing it at the Loft with a book launch party, isn't it?
Yeah, book launch is November 3rd, Saturday at the Loft on Speedway, and we're showing the doc. And we're having other readers. Margaret Regan's going to read, and Lauren Zubia from the Pistoleros is going to play some music, and yeah.
And I never got an invite. I'm terribly disappointed. So that's coming up, and you also have a trailer for the film.
There's a trailer for the book and the movie, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're going to sign off with that. Okay. So let's take a look at Brian's Tucson Salvage, the movie.
My Tucson roads, playing the songs you know, and what I do to hear that violin sing. Siren sound in this old town, and my nights flood with dreams of you. I'll be home soon.
My next guest is AJ Flick, a former reporter for the much-missed Tucson Citizen, where I had my first job in the newspaper business as a paper boy. AJ has just published her first book, Toxic Rage, A Tale of Murder in Tucson. The book examines the 2004 brutal murder for hire of Dr. Brian Stidham. AJ, welcome to Zona Politics.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
So anybody who lived in Tucson back in 2004 remembers this story, but talk a little bit about who Brian Stidham was and how he came to be murdered.
Brian Stidham was a very popular, very talented children's eye surgeon. And he was hired by another eye surgeon, Dr. Brad Schwartz, to come to Tucson and take over the children's eye practice in Dr. Schwartz's office. And suddenly, one night, his body was found stabbed to death in the parking lot of his medical complex.
And he'd had a falling out with his medical partner,
Yes.
Bradley Schwartz.
That's right. There had been previously, while they were working together, Dr. Schwartz had some personal issues, and he was self-medicating with Vicodin, some ailments of his, and was charged in federal court along with his fiancée at the time, Lourdes Lopez, a former prosecutor. And while he was being charged in federal court, his office was raided. Brian was a little cautious about working with him after that, and Brian was trying to break off, and then Schwartz ended up firing him. And from that, and from the legal case that ensued regarding Dr. Schwartz, where his medical license was taken away, he had to go to rehab, he had to work to get his practice back, and that's what prosecutors said caused this toxic rage that led to Dr. Schwartz hiring a hitman to kill Brian Stidham.
And it was a very brutal crime. And talk a little bit about Brad Schwartz. I mean, Type A doesn't even really seem to cover his personality.
Yes, their personalities were vastly different. You had Brian, who was calm and friendly, and then you had Brad Schwartz, who was aggressive in many ways and very. He's from New York State, and it's that kind of what you might call a New York State attitude, very in your face. And when he came to Tucson to start a practice, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But he also was a very talented eye surgeon himself, and quite the ladies' man.
Yes, it sounds like. And among his paramours was, as you mentioned, a former prosecutor from the Pima County Attorney's Office, Lourdes Lopez. And that really dragged in the Pima County Attorney's Office into the middle of this case, and some prosecutors lost their job. Unwind that a little bit.
Yeah, it was very involved with a lot of the doings of the prosecutor's office. Lourdes, when she was engaged to Dr. Schwartz, and she was prosecuted in federal court as well.
For the drug charges.
For the drugs, because he had been writing Vicodin prescriptions and giving them to her to fill, and then she would take some Vicodin, he would take the most of it. And he did that with other people as well. So when she was in the prosecutor's office, she knew that she was going to be indicted in federal court. So Barbara Lawal, the county attorney, asked her to resign. And later, it comes into play where Lourdes is not working in the prosecutor's office, but still had many contacts, many friends in the prosecutor's office.
And she was no longer engaged to Brad Schwartz at that point, right?
Eventually, yeah. The last year or so was not engaged to him. But at the time, one of the other prosecutors was throwing a charity party that he does every year. And the issue came up of whether Lourdes, who had been disgraced, would be invited, and should they be in her presence. And that became an issue with several other prosecutors, where they were fired, and they fought their firings, and brought a lot of issues like that to light that we didn't know about in the prosecutor's office.
Right, because after she heard about the murder, she knew right away it was probably Brad Schwartz who had.
She suspected, but she still had a lot of denial, but she actually became the main accuser, the person who put it all together, and talked about how Brad had many times said, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to have him killed. He apparently had said that to a number of people who were all brought into the case, but nobody believed him. Everybody thought, well, everybody says that, I'm so mad I could kill you. But then the person doesn't usually turn up dead.
Right, and in this case, he had hired a hitman.
Yes.
Very
unlikely hitman.
How so?
Well, I mean, if you had to hire a hitman, Bruce Bigger would not be, the first person most people would choose. That he was from Indiana. He was a drug addict, and he really did not have a violent criminal history. Some fights, and oftentimes in these fights, he was the one who was being beaten up. So it's not like you would just say, oh, look at this guy, and yeah, he's the guy I want to kill my former partner or anything like that. And so it was very unusual. And it was also very unusual that Brian was stabbed to death. Very unusual for hits to happen like that. Bruce Bigger had access to a gun, and normally you would think if you're going to kill someone for someone else, you're not going to get up close. Brian Stidham had no defensive wounds, but he had multiple stab wounds.
And where is Bradley Schwartz today?
Bradley Schwartz is serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole in the Arizona State prison system.
And the hitman, Bigger.
Yes, he is serving life without parole in prison.
And how did you come to write this book?
I was working for the Tucson Citizen. I was covering the courts, and at first, when I was actually right up the road when Dr. Stidham was killed, but once it became a court case, once they arrested Brad Schwartz and Bruce Bigger, it went from the cop reporters to me. So I covered the court case from the very beginning. And after one of the trials, Schwartz was tried first and then Bigger, a publisher actually came to me and said, how'd you like to write a book? And which almost every reporter loves to hear those words.
No kidding.
And so I said I'd love to. After Bigger's trial, then I basically over about 3 months wrote this book. And we almost went to print, but for some other technical reasons, it never got published. And so I kind of put it on a back burner as the Citizen closed, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And picked it up from time to time. And then in the last couple of years, I met this publisher with Wild Blue Press out of Colorado. Other true crime author friends that I knew recommended him. And so he said, yes, I'll publish it. So,
why do you think there's still interest in this case all these years later?
I asked that very question because every once in a while I'll get called for a true crime show to talk about this case, and there's one coming up on Discovery ID about this case again, even after all this time. And I asked one of the producers, and he said, it's the people. First of all, to have someone like Brian Stidham murdered, it's very unusual. He's not, popular doctors don't show up dead every day. And then you have another doctor accused of hiring this unlikely hitman, and a former prosecutor who was engaged to Dr. Schwartz being the main accuser. It's got these twists and turns that even, I found out, and you'll have to read the book, that these twists and turns are continuing to this very day. This case still has surprises. I was very interested when I was looking through the appeals.
That's a great tease.
Yes.
For people to pick up the book. My guest today, AJ Flick, talking about her new book, Toxic Rage, and we will be right back with Susan Friese from Literacy Connects.
Zona Politics is made possible with the generous support of the Loft Cinema, Tucson's independent movie theater. The Loft features independent, foreign, and documentary films, cult classics, discussions with filmmakers, and much more, including the Loft Film Fest in November. The Loft is located at 3233 East Speedway Boulevard. Showtimes can be found at loftcinema.org. Support for Zona Politics is provided by Hotel Congress in historic downtown Tucson. More information at hotelcongress.com and 622-8848. The Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce serves the business community in the bilingual, bicultural region of the Arizona-Sonora border and is a proud media partner with Zona Politics. Learn more at TucsonHispanicChamber.org.
All of these young people from the community come together, actually get up and do something.
We can do anything!
I think we've attracted a lot of people that are super passionate.
We're here at the No Ban, No Wall protest.
If you come out of college, you have this experience, you know how things run, you have a huge leg up.
People who have ideas and who are dreamers, you know what I mean, who really want to get themselves out there. I think that they should come here.
My next guest is Susan Friese, who's Director of Community Engagement at Literacy Connects. Susan, welcome to Zona Politics.
Thanks, Jim.
So talk to me about what is Literacy Connects?
So Literacy Connects is a local Tucson nonprofit supporting literacy and creative expression. And really we're about reading and understanding and communicating.
and you have programs for both adults and children. What percentage of the adult population here in southern Arizona really struggles to read?
You know, statistics are stated that about 500,000 adults in Pima County are reading at or below 5th grade level.
That's a pretty huge number.
Yeah.
And how does that hold people back?
Oh gosh, all kinds of ways. I mean, I've worked with adults who, you know, obviously it's tough to get a job. It's difficult to fill out an application. Oftentimes they're not computer literate. But there's some extra stuff that goes along with that. I mean, adults who aren't proficient readers have to compensate, and they don't put themselves in situations where they might be found out. And so they really try to stay under the radar, and so it's tough.
A lot of
for
challenges.
them. There's a lot of challenges, yeah.
You know, I don't even remember learning how to read. It just, I captured it at such a young age. But talk a little bit about just what happens when someone comes into Literacy Connects to learn how to read.
Well, it kind of depends on who they are. So if it's an adult who is a native English or a proficient English speaker, they come in and they have an interview, and it's really just to find out what their experiences have been, what's worked for them in the past, what's not, what their goals are. And then we do a brief reading and writing assessment. It's not a test, we don't do tests. It's really just to find out where they are currently, because we want to meet our learners where they are. And so we will assess that, figure out a game plan for them. It might be a one-to-one tutor, or it might be classes, or it might be a combination of both.
Because you offer a wide range of services for folks who need to build up their skills in this area. And how, it must be amazing when somebody actually starts to get it.
It's so cool. It's so cool. It's why I do this work. I'll give you an example. We have a student named Omar, and he'll be cool if I share this story. Omar came to us from Jamaica. He had really no educational opportunities in his home country. And so when he came to us 4 years ago, he was a non-reader. When we did his reading assessment, he couldn't read anything, and we gave him a very, very basic level reading sample. He could point out some letters that he was familiar with. He's been working with us for the last 4 years. He has progressed tremendously. He's reading at about a 5th grade level now, close to 6th. He has a job. He's actually been hired from one job away to another position at another company. He's studying for his driver's license test now. I mean, he's just studying for his citizenship test. So it's just really thrilling to watch him blossom and his confidence blossom. And it was funny, he was in our office the other day, and there was a piece of paper on the boss's desk, and he was looking at it. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." Now he's reading things he doesn't even need to be reading them. It's just happening.
He's eavesdropping.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
You also try to get into schools to try to ensure that kids learn to read, so they don't have to go through this as an adult.
Right.
And you have a Reading Seed program. Talk about that.
So the Reading Seed program is a program where we go into local elementary schools, and teachers will identify some kids who need some extra help. They're struggling, not reading at grade level. And we'll match those kids with a Reading Seed coach. Now, the coach isn't a teacher. They're not there to teach the kids to read, but they're really there to share the experience of how fun books can be and how fun it is to explore the world through reading. And so a big part of what the Reading Seed coach does is learn about the kid and build a relationship with the kid and find out what that kid likes. I mean, kids don't really have a lot of choice when they go to school. I mean, we tell them when to get there and what they're going to do when they get there and when it's time to change classes and when recess is and when they're going to eat lunch and what they're going to read. And so when they get with their coach, the coach says, what do you want to read? Or he or she may present a whole sampling of books and say, which one of these looks good to you today? And maybe they don't, maybe the kid doesn't read, maybe just the coach reads to them, or maybe they read together, or maybe they play a literacy-related game. But it's really about finding what's going to hook that kid and what is just going to light his head on fire.
And I have a little girl in kindergarten, 5 years old now, and I learned that she had an opportunity to get involved in the Stories That Soar program that you have. So, talk a little bit about that. Stories
That Soar, we call them stories for short, so I'll just refer to them like that. Amazing, super empowering program where a troupe of professional actors and actresses and musicians go into a school and they do an assembly for the children. They get all the kids, it's for elementary kids, and they have this magic box. And they tell the kids, the magic box has to eat your stories or it will starve. You have to write stories for the magic box. And so really, the stories can be about anything. It's the kid's choice. They may get some prompts, but it's really the kid's choice. It's not graded. It's not, the punctuation doesn't matter. The spelling doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be in English. But the kids feed the box stories for several weeks. And they get some instruction. You know, it can't just be random sentences, but it's got to have a story, and it's got to have an idea and a plot and action and all of this. So they're writing their stories, and then we come and we take the box and we read every single story, the actors of Stories That Soar. And then they pull out a handful that they think they can really bring to life. And then we get all the kids back together at school, and they see their stories come to life.
Amazing. I tried to work with Olivia on one, and she doesn't always like to do her homework. And she basically said, this isn't your worry, Dad. Leave me alone. So we didn't get one in this year, but I'm hoping next year
she'll be a
little bit more ready for it.
One of the kids at one of the schools said, I'm going to make my own magic box. So until you guys come back, I'm going to be feeding my stories to my own magic box.
I hope that she gets that enthused about it in the years to come.
Yeah.
What can people do to help with your program?
Well, we are a nonprofit in Tucson, and one thing that's really unique about us is we don't take any federal funds, and we don't take any funds from the Arizona Department of Education. That comes with some strings attached, and we really want to do what's best for our students, and things like standardized tests and checking documentation status, not necessarily in the best interest of our students. So we've left that behind, and we are completely funded by private donations and family foundations and business partnerships and community partnerships. So financial support is very important to us. So,
Well, I just want to thank you for all the hard work that you do, because I can't imagine what it'd be like to not be able to read, and it would, and certainly you're helping create a new generation of potential consumers for my newspapers. So, thank you so much for all that you do, Susan.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest, Susan Friese from Literacy Connects. You can learn more about them online. And that is our show for today. My thanks also to our media partners at Tucson Weekly, Inside Tucson Business, Tucson Local Media, Creative Tucson, and Community Radio KXCI 91.3 FM, where you can hear a radio version of Zona Politics at 5 p.m. on Sunday afternoons. I'm Jim Nintzel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Zona Politics is hosted by Tucson Weekly senior writer Jim Nintzel. The program is produced by Jennifer Powers Murphy and Danny Vinnick, and edited by Jim Rundle. Special thanks to KXCI, Tucson Weekly, Brink Creative Digital, and all supporters who provide crucial funding for the program. Learn more about Zona Politics at zonapolitics.com, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.